It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity. It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity. It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity. It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity.
Good evening, model citizens. Whoa. Why aren't I showing on my camera? Oh, is my camera locked up already? Can people hear me? Apparently it's going to be one of those days already. Let me try and fix my camera. Oh boy. It was working earlier and now it's not working. Let's get off that and let's go back to that. And it's not showing up. Well, folks, I apologize, but I'm gonna need a second because it is just not. Oh, good stuff, right? All right, everyone, give me 1 second. Okay, maybe I'm getting somewhere. Let's find out. Hey, we can see me now. We can see me now. Well, that was fun, everybody. Hope everyone enjoyed that that intro. But it looks like I'm here now. Thanks, everyone, for being there. If we're having any problems, let me know. Yeah, I knew the other cameras were live. It just seemed like this one camera froze. I actually unplugged it, got rid of the one device and plugged it anyway. Oh, what an adventure. What an adventure. So let's now that I'm here, showing up late, let's see who else is here. We've got Adam Cruz in the house. Al Mara is here. Andy Ambrose. Colin Wykes joining us. CP368 Productions is here. Digger Evans Model Railway Dragon Lover 68. Joe Rader, Black Rock Central Railroad. Lauren Hurwitz in the house. Martin Searsma is here, M&M Short Lines Railroad. We've got Nathan DeLay, Nisi J, Roy Elpham in the house. Split Rock 323 joining us as well. We've got Mr. Steve Arnold is here, Steve Childers, and Steve 87th PSAP. We might need to start naming, or I should say numbering, the Steves. We got Rich from Trains and Things K&R Custom Models, and at the bottom of my list, but not least, is Wigwag Workshop. Sorry for that little stutter in the beginning. That definitely threw me off a little bit. It's definitely not what I was expecting. Tonight we've got a pretty exciting conversation. I think, at least. Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to catch up with some comments now. I'll have to go back and check some comments. But I do have a guest here, Bryan Fraser. Welcome, sir.
Hello.
Awesome. I'm going to do a little quick unboxing of an item that I got in the mail before we get to the topic of the day, but I just wanted to invite you up. But we'll talk to Bryan in a second. I do have on my workbench a little box that I got, and when the box came, it had my logo all over it. But as you notice, it's actually the Blaine Heath logo. So the person that sent it to me is Nick from PTF Designs, who is one of my new channel sponsors, and he livened up the box a little bit with my Blaine Heath thing. So we're gonna take out this new Nate, just Nate from Nate HON3 East Broadtop mentioned this little finger knife, and I thought it was a really interesting knife, so I got it. It basically takes regular, X-Acto blades, but you hold it, with your finger, so you're basically pointing and cutting. And I thought that was a really cool knife idea, so we're going to use that to open this box, if I can figure out how this box opens. I think part of the trick is going to be figuring out this box. No, it's just this. People don't know, Nick from PTF Designs does background flats. So I'm expecting these to be some Z-scale background flats, but who knows? Yeah, no cutting myself. I know I'm doing my doing my best. I do not want to. I don't want to make a repeat performance of that moment of almost cutting myself. So let's put the cover back on that and put that away. Oh, jeez. I don't know if you can see what that says. I always joke about that he's going to do a Conrail giveaway surprise. So we'll have to look to see what's in there. But yeah, here's his card. You can actually use the code HUMAN for 10% off. I've got a little I don't know where it is. Here we go. There we go. Well, 10% off. Get rid of that. 10% off code HUMAN at checkout. People want to get their own stuff. No, I really want to see what's in. I want to see what's in this guy first. Oh. And turn that off. Okay. I really want to open this first. Let's see. I keep joking at every stream that I'm on of his that he should give away his Conrail Heritage Unit. So it looks like the Conrail giveaway. It looks like he made some Blaine Heath stickers for me. That's so awesome. That's too funny. Conrail. Anyway, inside joke. Let's unwrap these. Oh no, he didn't. Oh no. So these are Z-scale, and I'm going to use these on my Z-scale layout. I'm going to take these out carefully. What I love that he does with his background flats is he also puts LEDs in them. So you can see wires on a lot of these, which feed different LEDs. So this little factory background flat, he's got a little LED on the Blame Heath advertisement that's up on top of the building. That's funny. Yeah, Nathan, these are all he custom made these. I basically told him that, I want something, and he said, let me think about it. And I asked for stuff in Z scale just because that's what I'm working on right now, and this is kind of what he came up with. He normally does everything on this half-inch foam, but he made a lot of these on the quarter-inch for me just so that he could get different. Well, you'll see. It's got different sort of reliefs built in. Boy, he didn't make this easy for me to open, did he? I guess I should have opened the box off camera and unwrapped them all and then pretended to do the opening on camera. Uh yeah, if they're HO, you could see him. He does make everything in HO as well. Oh, that's so cool. Uh some of the details that he does too. I don't know if you can see, but there's actually smoke coming out of the smokestack, which is just a really nice little detail on those. And on this one, it's got oh, it looks like this one's got a couple LEDs. Wow. Yeah, there's some I can feel right here. He put an LED over the door, and he put two LEDs over the Heinz company, but they are small. They're small LEDs, so they work really nicely for the Z scale. I think Nick's pretty creative. Yeah, they do. They look very realistic. They're printed on like a waterproof vinyl as well. Last one will open. Yeah, so he basically took, all these you can buy all these buildings individually. But he took and he basically, photoshopped them all together and then printed them, and then you could see like, this building is stepped back. And these buildings are stepped back to give a little bit of sense of depth on them. Lehigh says Nick's products are great. I got a Christmas vacation house in O scale, and he loves it. Yeah, I like too. He's got some Halloween stuff that's really cool. He's got Mount Rushmore. You can get Mount Rushmore. He's got some alien stuff. He's got a UFO. A lot of various different things. Look at these. Oh, wait a second. I think this is Z scale, and I think these are N scale. Took me a second to get there, but I'm pretty sure I didn't realize he was sending me both. Yeah, so this I believe is the Z scale. It's gonna fit basically on my layout right. Gonna fit right here on my how when I have my Z scale layout on my desk and the loops go around, this was gonna go right about here so that one of the tracks would go behind it. But I bet these look like they're N scale or for this stuff. I'll have to ask them. That's maybe, I think this is N scale also. Who knows? We'll get that figured out. Let's get this little train going on the desk. And not gonna work if that's there. We're gonna hit I still have the Edgar Allan Poe Ravens car. And that was my boxing. Digger says I need some of those. Absolutely, Digger. They're really pretty cool. See, human can't tell the difference either. Well, what do you expect from me? Yeah, one day I'll figure out the difference. Yeah, see, Steve Arnold can't tell the difference either. So Heath, who is the guy on the boxcar? That is Edgar Allan Poe. He did a poem called "The Raven," and I don't know. I couldn't recite the poem for you, but it is. It's a pretty famous poem of his, I guess you can say. So micro trains put or made a boxcar with that logo on it here. Overhead. So there it is. So it's Edgar Allan Poe in the center. And he can do a little magic trick with his head coming off of his body. And we got the ravens. And on the other side, it's even got some cool graffiti on the other side as well. So let me see if I can't get this back on the track now. Off and running again. Poem. It's all about a guy. No, not that poem. Different poem. People are asking, why did you choose N scale if you're too old to see it properly? I couldn't see what I was doing, and I got that on the track just fine. So I don't think you need to be able to see the model railroad at all. Oh, Digger's saying, is that true, Digger? I thought, no, that's Poe on there. Oh, and apparently I've knocked it off the track, so it hits something, and now it's off the track. Today's stream is just going great, isn't it? Can't get stuff on the track. At least Brian got up here without any problems. So Brian, how's life out in California?
Good. A lot cooler than it was last week. We were in triple digits already all of last week. This week we're down to only 80 degrees.
See, and it's 90 here, and I thought it was warm, but I guess I should just say that I am glad I am not in California. So we met doing the recordings for the NMRA National Convention, which is coming up. It starts on June 6th. You can go to, NMRA 2021, go to their website. $49 for 80 hours of content. It's somewhere between 60 to 70 clinics that they're doing, as well as just other places to hang out, Q&A, and all that kind of stuff. So that's where I met Brian. But Brian, how did you get into model railroading, and what scale do you model?
So I model in O scale, 1 to 48. So as people were saying in chat, I model in scale that you can see. The issue is
Yeah.
that O scale takes up a bit of room. So I don't really have a layout at home. It's more of snap track that, hey, I want to run some trains. I have to lay the snap track out, takes up most of the living room just for a tight circle, and mostly get to really exercise the trains when I am able to go to shows and have it there. In terms of getting into model railroading, I got a model railroad kit when I was 5 years old and was hooked ever since.
Awesome. Was it O scale as well when you were young? Do you remember?
I believe it was because I think that was because I've done O and HO live steam, and then I've also been part of a historical society as well. So I think the first one was O scale.
So you truly are a model railroader then. You've got all these different scales and everything.
Somewhat. The HO, I never actually owned any HO equipment. It was being part of the local HO club in Medford, Oregon. The I forget the name of it now. I want to say it's the Pacific and Eastern is what they model from Medford, Oregon to Klamath Falls. There was never actually a line built, so it's freelancing it. But the Pacific and Eastern did run out of Klamath Falls mostly as a logging line. So what happens if they went from Klamath Falls over to Medford and served all the industries on the way over?
Awesome. And so I sort of jokingly said, like, you're obviously a model railroader, but your presentation was on what is a model railroad, and or is it? I keep getting the title confused. It's what is a model railroader, or what is a model
What
railroad?
is model railroading?
What is model railroading? So I posted kind of a, what do you call it, a community post about this. And one person responded that the difference between model railroading and toys is cost. Another person mentioned marketing. But I know you came up with kind of a list of different criteria of,
Right.
of what. So I thought the first thing we should probably do is look at what the criteria is that separates model railroading from toys. And maybe some people will have some opinions about the criteria.
Certainly, if I may. So if I go and pull up. So this is an excerpt from the presentation next month at the National Model Railroading. So question comes up, what is model railroading? Well, should be rather easy. This is the National Model Railroad Convention. We should have, the National Model Railroad Association should have a definition, right? No.
Theoretically.
Theoretically, but I have not been able to find anywhere where the MMRA has actually defined what model railroading is. They define what their goal is in supporting the hobby. They don't actually define what it is. So then we go to the dictionary. Well, the dictionary isn't any help because they have the definition of a model and they have a definition of a railroad. So then if we go to everyone's favorite source of inaccurate information, Wikipedia, we get kind of close of model railroading as a hobby in which rail transportation systems are modeled at reduced scale. Well, all right, but again, how does that differ from a toy? So then we ask the question, what do we consider model railroading? And then for me, it boils down to kind of 5 different criteria of detail, layout, and there's subsections in the layout that we go over in the full presentation. Operations, whether it's simply a loop of track that the train runs around or you're doing full OPSIG operations on it. Does it have a cohesive theme? And the most important one, in my opinion, is it believable as a railroad? Does it work together as a whole? So kind of 2 examples on...
Before you get to your examples, so the people that said cost and marketing, like, I'm just curious, how did you come up with those 5 when you were doing your research and like not include things like cost and marketing and some of those other things? Because there are, a lot of different people are joking about opinions in the chat, but there are a lot of different opinions on what makes something something.
Correct. I wasn't looking necessarily at cost because I know there are a couple of toy trains out there that are quite expensive. And then of course you always have your one-off exhibition piece. Like I think someone has done a Lionel tin plate model in actual gold.
Oh, wow.
If I remember correctly. So it's like, well, it's the Lionel tin plate. Usually everyone considers that a toy. On the other hand, if we're going by cost, that's probably more expensive than even an HO brass locomotive. So how I came up with it was normally when we think of a model, kind of like the background picture here, it's relatively hard to tell that that is in fact a model. That if you saw that in passing, you would probably think that that's relatively an old-fashioned black and white photo. And that's because the steam engine in the photo has lots of detail on it. There's lots of nice detail in the ballasting. There's fence posts in the background. You can see out of focus some vegetation. In terms of layout, it's what goes into the layout. And one of the things that I mentioned in the presentation is these 5 criteria don't necessarily need to all be present to make something a model railroad or to consider it model railroading. I just kind of have these as kind of a checklist of, does a model have one of these? If yes, no, or is it somewhere maybe-ish in the middle? And again, it's not, oh, it meets all of these or it doesn't meet all of these, therefore it's not a model railroad. Well, it helps us analyze what it is. So I already went over detail. In terms of layout, basically it's how much effort went into building it. Is it custom benchwork, custom wiring, detailed scenery? Was it a custom track plan that was drawn up, or was it a pre-canned layout essentially? And then what type of material is used in the layout itself? Operation.
I was saying, why don't you throw out some of those examples as we go through some of these,
Okay.
just to give some of the specifics, because like some people are joking around saying if I run my Thomas, I can't find it now, but if I run my Thomas train around my layout on a schedule, does that make it then a model railroad and not a toy?
Well, and that's part of what we go into in the full presentation is I'm not coming out and saying here is a definitive thing. One of the things we talk about is a scale and where on the scale things are. So, for example, a loop around a Christmas tree. I mean, yes, there are definitely people who spend months putting up loops of trains around the Christmas tree, but for the most part, it's going to be, hey, we went to the toy store, we went to the hobby store, we bought a loop of track, and in this case, the Polar Express, and we put it around the tree. Versus going to a full layout like this, and no, this is obviously what pretty much all of us would consider a model. It's highly detailed. Okay, it's a yard, so you don't have too much detail besides the buildings. There isn't that much greenery in this scene. But all of the rolling stock is nicely detailed. This particular layout I was invited to come to for an operating session. So this models the Cajon Pass from San Bernardino up to Bakersfield. And so we were running trains. This is the San Bernardino yard. From here up the pass, and the grade is in fact steep enough that you need to run helpers on the train. That if you don't have helpers, this quote unquote standard engine consist that was that would have been pulling that train can't actually make it up to the top end of the layout. So these are kind of the two bookends of what we talk about in the presentation. There's a bunch more examples in the middle, and that's where we start getting into the gray area, and that's where the discussion starts getting interesting of what are we defining as a model railroad.
So I just posted in the chat, do people agree that trains around a Christmas tree are toys? And I do think, see if I can find it again. But somebody was saying that here we go. It's a good one. Model railroading is someone recreating anything in real life in miniature. Which I guess, Steve Arnold, my question to you would be is, does that mean that only prototypical railroads are model railroads? Whereas if I did a freelance model railroad, would it then be a toy because it's not, because it's not based on reality or whatever? So I think there is an interesting my Christmas setup made for some nice photo opportunities. That's true. And I got back into this as well through a layout or through tracks around a Christmas tree. Cowboy Valley and Timberline says it does not matter what you consider a model or toy. Digger is saying anything that goes around in circles. My bench saw only moves in circles. So, yeah, I guess that's an interesting question is, do you have to be able to operate on it for it to be considered a model railroad? So I do think it's, one is an adjective, one is a verb. Anthony will correct that if I am wrong. Not sure what he's referring to. Thomas from Split Rock 323, who happens to be a NMRA model master railroader, says, I don't think model railroading needs a definition. The NMRA deals with scale trains only, mostly North American prototypes. So that's interesting. So model railroading can refer to scale trains. So then a model railroad could be a toy.
Right. Or one of the examples that we come up, I mean, we have a nice realistic underpass, or we can have the space orcs invading from Mars. Is it still a model railroad? I mean, it's certainly a more fantasy. I don't think that you would be able to find space orcs in real life, but it's certainly there. It's not. It certainly falls under model railroading. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a prototypical railroad, but I know there was in an old Trains magazine, there was an article on someone's layout, and someone had modeled a layout. I forget if it was on the moon or the Mars, and talking about it, and it's like, okay, is this a model railroad? It's completely fantasy, but doesn't meet all the definitions for a model railroad.
Well, it's funny. So Claude from Cowboy Valley and Timberline says it's a hobby. It doesn't need to be defined like that. And I guess that's a little bit what we're exploring, though, is we're saying model railroading as a hobby versus a toy, which a toy wouldn't necessarily be a hobby from that point of view. So yeah, Steve Arnold has an 1.5 inch. I believe it's a diesel Santa Fe locomotive that he runs. So he says that's his toy. Yet that's he takes that out and puts that on tracks outside and runs it like a real locomotive. So I don't know. That could be a model.
And one of the examples in the presentation is live steamers. So either I believe it's the 7.5 inch scale or grand scale. And the question is that a model railroad? Because you certainly have a large enough scale that you can get very detailed in. There are live steamer layouts that run operations on them, but you don't think of them usually as a model railroad. You think is, oh no, it's a toy. The joy comes in running around a loop and riding on the train.
So Steve Childers looked up the definition, I guess, of toy, and I'm not played with. So toy is played with, and then model is construct a representation simulation. So if you play with a model, then it becomes a toy.
Well, wouldn't we all play with the models then? Because in that case, is that if it's moving, you were playing with it, would it not?
So is
Or
so is all of model railroading a toy? Maybe we maybe we shouldn't throw that out there. That might make somebody upset. But
but that's the
yeah, this
interesting
is
question.
it's only negative if you get offended by it being called a toy, and I think that's ultimately where this discussion gets heated. Is that some people hate when it's called a toy, and I think Lionel three rail people experience that more than some of the two rail people. But people look at three rails and they don't see real railroad. They see toys. So yeah, I'm enjoying the heck out of playing with my model toys. Yeah, exactly. Uh, let's see, moving is an animation, not necessarily a toy. Again, why do people consider toy a negative? To me, it's a positive. And I kind of agree. I mean, there's the whole statement of, the man who dies with the most toys wins. And they're not referring to cheap toys when they say that. But I guess what I think is interesting about this conversation is the reason why you actually created this topic, or why you came up with this topic. So I don't know if you want to get into that a little bit right now, as to
Sure, no, that's
why
fine.
why did you try and define this and start this whole fight in the first place?
So the impetus for this presentation came about from the last NMRA National Convention, which was the 2019 one in Salt Lake City. And I happened to be there for the entire week, both participating in the convention, and then also me and another gentleman from Sacramento, California, were displaying in the actual show. We didn't have enough room to bring a lot of scenery, but hey, we brought some track and put our trains on it. When I went, and because I was there the full week, I decided, hey, my trains are built from scratch. There are no instructions that I built them from. So I took them into the modeler showcase to go ahead and enter them. And I was told that no, my trains are not, in fact, built from scratch. They are kit bashed toys. I was like, why? Because I think most of us would agree this is a rather nice example of a Pullman coach, until you look closer at it and you start realizing it's built from Lego. So that brings up the question, is Lego a toy? Or is it simply a building medium?
So at the end of the day, did you convince them to let you enter your stuff, or basically they said, no, you're not, you can't
So
enter?
at the end of the day, I was able to enter, and I was not able to enter under scratch building. I was only under kit bashing. Because the argument is I went out and bought a couple of kits and put it together. Well, for the car that I just showed, sure, I went out and bought, well, I didn't actually go out and buy any kits. There are people online in the Lego community separately who buy kits, pull them apart, and sell the pieces individually. So that car is built of 2,000 different pieces. Because if I come back, and if I pull it up, so here is the 3D model of the car itself, and the trucks are over on this side because this particular application doesn't like rendering the trucks in there. But yes, it's individual pieces, and you can see them kind of highlighted as I move my mouse over them. But there's no kit to this. Same thing if I pull up my steam engine. So I don't have this one built yet. That's one of the reasons why I build it in 3D space first, is to figure out what parts I need. And all the parts are over here on the side. And right now, there's 1,000 different parts on this steam engine. And again, there's no instructions to how to build this. It's just sitting here with the list of possible bricks over on this side, and just figuring out how to build it.
Roy Eltham says, I have several dozen Lego sets, many on display around my house. They are not toys.
Right. Well, and then you start getting into stuff like this. This is a picture from the Pennsylvania Lego Users Group at one of their shows. And I'm not sure most people would be able to argue that this is in the realm of toys anymore. Because, I mean, you have nice looping track, you have beautiful scenery, you have a nice roundhouse, whether you're getting into switching or such. And then you start getting into the engines themselves. So this particular engine is now available as instructions. No one sells a kit for it. You still have to go out and find the parts yourselves, but they do offer instructions for this one. This is one of my personal steam engines, the SP&S 700, based out of Portland, Oregon. And then we start getting into some of the cars. Like, if I had shown this picture first of a center beam flat car, would most people have realized that it's made out of Lego? Until you start zooming in and wondering what all of the kind of patterns are in the wall.
I will say, so I used this photo and a photo of the Pullman for my community post, and I don't know if anybody recognized it, but nobody posted that it was a Lego train. But TrainFan120 did notice your steam locomotive photo that I used as the picture for this stream. He did notice right away that it was Lego, and he actually commented on it. But I don't know. I guess I'm kind of curious as how many people actually noticed that this picture or the other pictures were Lego before I said something. Sparky107107 says, with Lego, it's just a toy until you build something awesome. Then it's a display unit, touch it and die. Yeah, let's see, where did he say this? Lego trains are very nice, but are they built to a scale?
Yeah.
Because earlier you did say you model in O scale, so...
Correct. And so that is one of the kind of debates about the community of the Lego sets as they come. I would agree that those are not models. Those are toys. They are not proportioned correctly. They're too short and too tall. So trying to build out an actual engine in 1:48 scale, that's where that's one of the reasons why this is such a long car, is that this is in fact the, I believe, 82 feet that the real heavyweight Pullman worked out to be, versus, if I pull up this guy, so this is an RS3 switching engine, and yes, he is smaller than the Pullman, as it should be, but he is relatively, he should be the correct size, as close as you can get in Lego. Obviously, there are going to be issues of, no, I can't get the exact length 100% accurate because I'm limited on how many studs I can use. I can't, at least for me personally, I don't like cutting Lego, and so I'm limited to a full stud. So that's plus or minus about 2 feet in O scale. So I can't get down to the exact inch, but I can get pretty close to it. And part of the challenge and part of my joy for it is going through and figuring out how to model with a limited parts, such that I have to be creative in the part usage and what part looks closest to the part that I'm trying to create.
Hamilton Sullivan says, do you guys have any realistic Lego center cab locomotives?
And we were discussing about this previously of, for example, the GG1. So I personally do not have a locomotive. I personally do not have a center cab. I try to go and modeling the SPS in the 1950s. So most of mine is modeled end of the steam era, beginning of the diesel era, and we don't have electrics on the line. If I can bring it up.
One person mentioned too that Lego has no scale, even the train sets.
Correct. Normal Lego itself. So if I may real quick. So this is someone's custom model of a GG1, both in the Pennsylvania and Conrail paint schemes. So there are out there, it's just you're not usually going to find instructions for these. It's going to be created from scratch. In terms of scale, no, Lego themselves don't really have a scale. If you take a standard, what we call a minifig, the Lego figurine, and you actually measure out the body proportions, that's a really poorly proportioned human. And
Yeah.
the legs are way too short, the arms are way too long, your arms are hanging down at your knees type thing. And no, so Lego itself doesn't have a scale. And so, for example, what I model tends to be 8 studs wide. Lego itself usually only makes trains 6 studs wide, so they would probably be in scale. It's roughly 1 stud per foot almost. So if you modeled it, the trains would probably only be about 8 feet wide, is what those sets come out to be.
Yeah, and Steve 87th PSAP is saying Lego's not the only one that's out of scale. I mean, you look at G scale, they have 132, 128, whole bunch of others, and then there's O gauge and O scale, and standard gauge, semi scale, and everything. So, it's easy to point at Lego and say, that's not to scale, but Lego people do use minifig scale a lot, treating a minifig as 6 feet tall.
Correct.
So.
And there are certainly, as we're talking, let me see if I can find an example of it. There are certainly models built to what would be considered minifig scale, which is bigger than what I have built. The one issue that I have with it, at least, is just how quickly it starts getting that big. So how big something comes up and how many parts you're going to need for it.
Now, my understanding is you do not 3D print Legos. You're saying you try and just use standard Legos, but are there people that will 3D print Legos as well to make their items?
Yes. So I personally don't like 3D printing. I don't like cutting anything. Why are you not? Come on. However, there are certainly people who do. So this gentleman also models a bunch of other really cool stuff. But let me see if
Wait, hold on. Are these cars and everything? They're all Lego that we're looking at now?
Yeah. So these are all Lego. So if I click on one real quick and zoom in, you can see the anti-studs underneath the hood. There's just a lot of custom stickers to get the paint scheme and such correct on them.
Wow.
But so yeah, this gentleman models a lot 1 to 38 or bigger. So the kind of 3 engines that he has done is the Big Boy, which is the largest steam engine ever built, at least in the US. And it is rather big. It does not go around curves that well. It will go in a straight...
If he's doing 138, then does that run on Lego gauge track, or it's a totally different gauge track as well?
Yeah, so if you look, if I can find a good picture of it. So the track here at the bottom, that is standard Lego track. The front pilots are a standard size Lego wheel. And then the drivers are 3D printed, as are the drive rods. But most everything else on the engine is standard Lego at this point. The cowcatcher is, in fact, a standard Lego piece. You can see some LED wiring going through because this does light up. All of the lights and such do work. But for the most part, it is made from standard Lego, except for the running gear. Now, the gentleman that I model with out of Sacramento, he describes himself as a model railroader who models in Lego. So he is much more okay with cutting parts, gluing parts together, and creating custom parts to get something to look correct. And then we kind of agree that I am a Lego builder who models trains. So one of his other creations. This one is not, so this is one of the larger scales. So if you look, this is not standard Lego track that he is on. This is custom brick built track. And if I forget, let's see if he describes it. So yeah, so this is 1:16 scale that he built this at.
Oh, wow, that's huge.
It is, and I don't remember if he has pictures in this album. So yeah, here's all the lights on it, fully lit up.
Yep. The ditch lights and everything.
Yeah, and just all the detail that you can get when you're modeling that big. I know somewhere on here he has pictures.
Oh,
So
there it
yes.
is next to a person. Yeah, you can see how big it is.
Yeah, so here it is at a convention, and it is a big model.
Yep. Claude is saying if you want to enter an established contest, then you adhere to their rules of what is or it isn't. Pretty simple. And I think, though, from Brian's point of view, and not to speak for you, Brian, but I think that the issue is that there were no rules that would have disallowed him from entering. And that was part of where it got a little confusing. And Split Rock saying, oh, no, it wasn't Split Rock. It was Steve PSAP says this is a great discussion because it goes back to the Ridge rules, which I'm also not exactly sure what they are. But
And the rigid rules
turns people away from the NMRA.
Correct, and it's especially true in the especially for the model showroom and the judging that goes on. Because one new thing that they implemented is they specifically now say no Lego. However,
oh, they do.
They added a rule that says no Lego, but ahead of that they say any material. So I argue that, wait, so that means that you're banning all plastic now if I can't bring in Lego, because I am entering a plastic engine. It happens to be made out of Lego, but if you're banning Lego, then you're banning plastic, because I'm just putting plastic pieces together. I would argue kit bashing. You're normally, it depends what sits you're working with when you're kit bashing something, but you're normally working, but most of them are certainly plastic sets that you're working things together with. Well, okay, mine simply snap together instead of gluing and sanding and then painting everything to match.
Yeah, if they're going to allow somebody to 3D print something and enter it into a scratch building contest, why couldn't you use Legos?
Right, and I argue mine's more challenging. For example, if I bring it back up here, so
NMRA contest rule, celebration room rule D, all entries to be judged must be scaled models. No Lego, high rail, or such entries will be permitted. I didn't realize high rail also is excluded. Huh.
Correct, but I argue that I am 1:48, that this is in fact a scale model, that if you get out a scale ruler, it will mostly measure correctly, and the limitations come simply on the actual studs of how to get it together. And the other challenge is, and I didn't bring a good example of it, but is how to get the paint scheme to work. Because there is, besides the lettering, there is no sticker on it. There is no paint.
Mm.
All the paint is the color of the Lego. So I have a couple of passenger cars built out of modeled for the Empire Builder, because the Empire Builder cars did run on the SP&S. I don't think I actually said SP&S is the Spokane, Portland, and Seattle Railroad, running from Portland, Oregon to Spokane, Washington, and interchanging with the Great Northern and Northern Pacific railroads. So they had, so I have modeled both the Empire Builder and then the Main Street of the Northwest, I believe it's the butterleaf or the pine tree paint scheme, the dark green, light green with the pinstripe white on it. And the challenge is that Lego doesn't make a lot of parts in light green or orange. And so trying to figure out how to build around those constraints is part of the challenge and makes it interesting.
Yeah, Digger saying any material and then saying no Lego is a strange way of wording it. And then, where was this? The more I learn about the NMRA, the less I want to have anything to do with it. And I think it's, the NMRA had to come up with some rules, right? I mean, they had to come up with some way of judging stuff. And it is kind of, it is kind of an interesting, thing, because on a lot of the regional and divisional levels, it's great. Like, you meet a lot of people are great, but then you get involved in sort of the rules part of it, and it is very, very divisive. Edward's saying Legoland New York is almost finished being built. Yeah, it's being built outside of Goshen, New York, and I cannot wait until it's finished. I went to Legoland in Denmark, and I hope to go. I've never made it to the one in Anaheim, but I hope to go to here. Nathan DeLay was asking if you have a YouTube channel.
I do not. I do have a Flickr where all of my stuff is on. We also have there's a couple of Facebook groups. One is specifically for us on the West Coast, and then there's a national Lego model or modular group, and we've just gotten that off of the ground in the past 2 years. So part of the issue is we're still fine-tuning the main rules for it, because we've only, under that rule set, there's only been 2 or 3 conventions or shows that we've been able to go to with that rule set. So we're still fine-tuning those before we get down into the weeds. So there's a bunch of people that want to do some fun branch line stuff and to actually kind of make it a more organic layout at the shows. But for right now, it's focusing on mainline, trying to get that nailed down and then going from there. But even in that group, the argument is between people who model at 1:48 versus 1:36. And so to accommodate both, if you build any bridge or underpass or anything, it has to accommodate a 1:36 engine and rolling stock. And so it looks kind of silly for an O scale, a 1:48 train to go through, because it's way too wide and way too tall, an opening. But if someone shows up with a 1:36, they should have the luxury to be able to run it on the layout as well.
It's too funny. Fred Wild saying, what is the software you're using to define your models?
So the software that I use is called Stud.io, STUD.io, and it is a free software available from Bricklink, which is one of the websites that people use to sell individual Lego parts on.
So here is the Bricklink website with the link to the download page for that software. And just so people, so for your day job as well, and I picked it out right away after your presentation, but for your day job as well, you're an engineer. So a lot of this sort of figuring out and putting stuff together is something that you you do for a living as well as other things. Dragon Lover saying, is scratch building limited to using flat sheets of cardstock or styrene, or is using foam bricks or plastic bricks to create a building with hand cut foam shingles using your own plan considered a scratch build? And I think what the NMRA said, at least for the contest you entered, was that it wouldn't count as scratch building, but it would count as kit building because you're using fixed pieces of parts to kind of make a thing.
Correct. Now, on the other hand, reading deeper into the rules, you can enter a kit bash model into scratch building. However, because scratch built adds more points above what a kit bashed model would be, and so it's simply judged a little bit more to a higher level, but you're not normally, there's no harm going for it because, oh, I'm not getting the points that comes from pure scratch model build. Well, but that doesn't matter because those are extra points above a kit bash. And that one thing at the Salt Lake show was there weren't that many model entries. Normally, if there's a bunch of pure scratch built model entries, if you have a kit bash and you want to win an award, you enter the kit bash. That way you're not competing with the higher level of models that were built.
Higher level of detail, I'm guessing, too, that they can put on them.
Correct. However, one thing that I was arguing for scratch built is not so much on my switcher, but on my steam engines, they are fully custom drivetrains. So I have a motor, but getting the power from the motor back into the wheels is not a pre-built component. That is something custom that I built. And even for scratch building, you are allowed to have a off-the-shelf drivetrain. So that is all wheels. So that is pony truck, drive, and trailing wheel, all the drive rods, and the motor. That can be all off-the-shelf component straight from stock. It's everything from there up that is considered scratch built. So I was arguing that, well, hang on, I'm obviously in the scratch built category because I'm not even using that category that you're talking about. So if I go back to the model,
I think it comes down a little bit to it's, the rules aren't clear. I think it was Steve87 PSAP was saying it's funny that, Legos are a huge draw to train shows for the kids. It's what, Legos are what's getting a lot of kids into it. So why exclude them? And I've been going back and forth on this as well. Like the achievement program is still based on a time before 3D printing, before DCC, before a lot of that stuff. And I think the rules definitely need to be looked at. And Split Rock is saying, yeah, motive power achievement program does not include the drivetrain.
Correct. So
if you've built the drivetrain, that's
correct. So this is the motor. This is a standard off-the-shelf Lego motor that can go into any Lego thing. But then you come through and you have the gear train come out and then down. There's a bunch of hidden stuff because it's saying parts are colliding. They won't in real life, but there's some things that that this software doesn't get quite right. And then it comes out and powers, there's only one axle powered, but then the side rods will power the other axles on this particular one. But that's not an off-the-shelf component. So you can find these gears and this motor in a car set, or the Ferris wheel that they brought out a couple years ago, or the roller coaster. That's not a train-specific part. So again, it's more of the argument of what then do you consider scratch building? Now, admittedly, the year before I participated in this, so 2018, there was a gentleman who brought in an N-scale scratch locomotive. He spent 2 years building it. and in N scale built molds and poured brass for the drive wheels.
Wow.
So it was, and so it's like, okay, yes, that is pure scratch building. I will not take anything away from that. I mean, and he has he kind of has a blog going through building everything. It's like, yes, that is completely scratch built. I absolutely agree. My trains don't meet that level. But you look at some of the other stuff that people had brought in that here, and no, I'm about the same as the other ones. It's just where do you define comes from? And so that's the entire discussion. What is model railroading? And the argument becomes it's kind of a spectrum, and different people model in different locations on the spectrum. And where do you draw the hard line between model railroading and toy, or can you not? Do you have to evaluate everything individually, every piece of rolling stock, every layout separately, as whether it's a model or a toy?
Right. And that's, I mean, I think it's just a great conversation. I'm actually just posting the link now in the chat if people want to come up and maybe give their opinions as well, and maybe we can get into a little bit more of a dialogue as we go, because at the end of the day, right, it doesn't matter. Who cares at the end of the day? But I think it is just sort of fun because language is how we define things. Language is how we talk about things, and it's I think it's good when we have a common language, so that when you say something, we all sort of agree that we're talking about the same thing. But
Correct.
Go ahead.
And then, if I may, what was also interesting, though, at the same show, so that weekend, we all went from the hotel where the convention was to the convention center where the show was, and we had our layout, and across the aisle from us was a traditional layout. And so people would come up to us and ask what we have, and we'd say Lego. And they'd point behind them and say, no, that's Lego. What's this?
Yeah.
So, for example, pulling up some video from that. So, for example, this is from the show. And this is my passenger train that I had running at the show. And again, we didn't bring any scenery. We just brought track, and we were showing off the trains themselves and how they are. But running around like this from this distance, it's really hard to tell what it's made of.
Yeah.
And then we also have, this is from a different show. So this is up in Portland. So this is specifically a Lego show instead of a train show, but same thing applies, is you have a full train, and the sound was down slightly, so I can talk over it, but as the steam engine goes by, it has sound in it. You can hear it chuffing, you can hear it working, and then once it clears, so in the background behind it, this is my friend's full daylight passenger, daylight passenger consist that he's custom built, and that was kind of what spurred me on to build mine.
Yeah, it's really some of that detail is really impressive, and I know the train shows I go to always have like a Lego layout, and people are always around it looking. Like there's a couple people at the N scale, a couple people at the HO scale, and then there's tons of people around the Lego layout. So before we get to anybody that wants to come up, and so far nobody wants to give their opinion in person, but we'll see. I'm sure somebody will have an opinion. I do just want to take a second and thank everybody. It's a 45-minute clip. I don't know how loud the audio is going to be, so if you're wearing headphones, just be aware. I think the audio level is going to be fine. But just be aware, but I do just want to thank people that are supporters of the channel. Thanks everyone for watching that. So beyond the no Legos rule, a few things that would harm a Lego model, and I'm assuming he's talking about it as far as the scratch build stuff, is the paint and the
Correct.
finish. The color and lettering is done in Legos. The wheels and trucks need to keep them on the track. Yeah, let's see.
Correct. And I never entered the model contest to win. It's not. I know it's Lego. I know that there's a lot of detail. There's a lot of points that I lose from Lego, but it's to enter and make it a conversation. And one of the feedbacks that I got, not from the head modeler who was running it, who was kind of against him being in, but one of the other guys helping out, was it was actually really interesting because I generated more than half the questions that the judges had going around because they were having to figure out how does it apply in this situation. And so they were actually having to look back at the rules and figure out how to interpret the rules more precisely.
And I know there's been a lot of conversation specifically about what Split Rock's saying here. The NMRA has determined that a laser cutter and a 3D printer are tools, no different than an X-Acto knife, but you have to design it and 3D print it. So my understanding to like where the line is that you literally have to write all of the G code all the way up to optimizing it for the specific printer. So like you can't take a design and send it to a guy who modifies it for their printer, because then it's not 100% yours anymore. But if you take every step of the way and then have somebody else print it, that it'll still count. So it's a very, 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 very fine line, to say the least. But yeah,
That's
so
that's an interesting question. Yes.
so Andrew does O scale. He does 2 rail, and he's designing a lot of passenger coaches and stuff. But that's funny, right? If you're following a prototype, no, you're not designing it. So yeah, that's
I mean, there's no necessarily instructions for you to follow, but usually there's blueprints. And it doesn't tell you how to build it step by step, but here's the actual thing laid out. Here's all the measurements that you need.
yeah, it's you should be able to display your Lego creations in the celebrations room. The NMRA is trying to be more like an RPM meet and display models such as Lego and partially done projects as well. And I'm curious how things are going to change. There's going to be a big change in, I think it's July. Gordy's going to be coming in as the president, and he's got different views on things. It's still the NMRA. They still are all about standards, but yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. And Edward, I know you have a lot of opinions on things. Welcome to the party. So do you have an opinion on this subject?
Well, the way I look at toys is that they're designed to teach children on how to, no matter what the toy is, and they don't actually produce anything, if that makes sense. I mean, like a toy hammer, you can't really hammer a nail on it, but a real hammer you can. But and also not only that, what has I think one thing has happened is that there's a different there's what toys are has changed over the years.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, it's like, everyone sort of kind of remembers the General, if I can, not get flooded out by my new light. But I mean, it's shaft drive. It's obviously sort of a toy of its time. I also got the basically the Sierra #3 locomotive, which I guess is, from my understanding, is OO. It's not HO. So that's why it's, if you actually see that, compare this with the prototype, it looks odd because this is a narrow gauge engine because it's a larger scale.
But
Uh,
if we go back to what you're saying about a toy hammer as an example, let's say, like,
yeah,
you can't use a toy hammer to hammer a nail in. It's just kind of to teach the kids how to use a hammer. I would argue that a model railroad doesn't necessarily build anything. I mean, it doesn't necessarily create anything outside of what it is itself.
yeah. Uh,
So it
well, I
would
mean,
kind of be a toy from that definition then as well.
yes.
And Nancy Nancy keeps getting her channel shut down because YouTube thinks that model train or thinks her trains are toys. A lot of the videos that she does gets flagged because for whatever reason they think that her, running her layout, she'll do a layout video and they'll tag it as, for kids because YouTube thinks kids are going to like watching it. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how YouTube figures out that, it's like, oh, there's it sees a train on there and automatically assumes that is for kids. But also the thing is what consider the difference between models and toys. Uh, both of the previous models I showed you were basically, I think, are from the 70s and 80s.
Hmm.
And this is a relatively, I would say, newer Bachmann, which is a lot more highly detailed. This one doesn't have DCC in it, but it's a lot more. The toys are a lot more higher quality now. Um, and I think the difference between a model and a toy is that, I mean, this is just my opinion, is that toys are designed to be handled, whereas models are, you don't touch them. They move themselves, but not necessarily you're not touching them because you don't want to get fingerprints on them and you know ruin the
So
paint.
if you don't need to use the 5 finger crane, then model railroading is is not a toy. But if you need to use the 5 finger crane to come in and move things around, then it becomes more of a toy.
Uh, yeah, I mean, that's my sort of opinion on it.
Yeah. No, I
Because
get it. I'm just sort of, yeah. Um, Wigwag's saying a friend that has a model car channel gets flagged as toys, which I can see. A Lego train doesn't teach you to be an engineer either. Where do we misplace this argument? I don't think we misplaced
well, yeah,
place that
well, the
argument,
thing
but
is that one thing that model trains do as a toy, it doesn't actually like the toy hammer. It doesn't really do anything, but it does teach you logistics, architecture, carpentry. It's like there's so many things that can be taught, but not necessarily. If you screw something up, no one's going to die. The economy's not going to crash.
yeah.
It's that type of deal.
If I
Uh,
remember correctly, I think it is the London Underground in their training room actually has an HO layout with London Underground tube stock, specifically to
wow.
teach the drivers the signaling system because they have the working signaling system. They have all the points set up how it is on the actual one. So you have your driving simulators, your large one, but you have also an HO layout to train on. And oh, hang on, the signal's in this aspect. I need to wait until the operator flips the signal. Now I can go.
Right. Mystic Southern Railway says difference between model and toy. Would you let your kids play with it? Which is a little bit interesting because I got into trains when I was a little kid because my dad did let me play with it. So
And for
I
me,
guess
it would.
it's and yeah, like Andy Ambrose says, yes, I let my grandchildren play with my stuff, and yeah, sometimes they break things, but um, yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, it's an interesting question. You
Yeah,
about
I
to say
know.
something, Brian? Or
Yeah, I mean, for me, sure, I'd let kids control my trains, but, well, as long as their speed cap, the switcher that I have isn't quite speed capped on it yet. So if you turn it up to full speed, it will do like 120 miles an hour in scale. But in terms of picking it up, no, I wouldn't let them pick it up, because even me picking it up, you noticed on the switcher that I very carefully picked it up from the ends underneath, because if I pick it up from anywhere else, the trucks tend to fall off.
Right.
And so it's like, no, you need to be careful with it. And ideally, if I had a layout, set it on the layout and run it around, and it's not an issue anymore. But because I don't have a layout, anytime I want to use it, pull it out of the box and, oh yeah, parts fell off. It's Lego, can easily put them back on, but it's still rather fragile.
Nisi says that her kids are adults, so she lets her kids play with it, her trains. Sparky is saying, until you throw it against the wall because it derails all the time, so it's back to being a toy. Which, yeah, I've been tempted to throw things. This point can be argued forever, but the outcome is the same. It's how you see it. Absolutely, Al, and that's why I thought this was a great topic, just because I just think it's good to talk about. Like, I don't expect we'll come to a result or like a definitive answer, but I just think it's, some people are very passionate about it. Some people could care less, but I do think it makes an interesting topic. Edward, do you have any final parting words? And I'm going to drop you out and bring up our next guest.
No, I mean, like right now, my layout is I just actually, last night actually got all the track on there and tested it this morning and all that. It's plywood central. I mean, is that, would that be considered a toy? I mean, it's eventually going to get this whole scenery and all that fun stuff and all that, but since it's in process, would it be considered a toy?
Uh-oh. Steve's really throwing down now. Is a bagel a sandwich? Uh-oh. I think it is, but then again, I'm all about bagels, so.
It's
Edward?
a hot dog a sandwich.
I know that's Brian doesn't know, but that's how that started a while ago. Is like I would always ask, is a hot dog a sandwich? And we got him thinking.
I would argue it's not until you accidentally split the bottom, because until then it's one piece of bread. Once it's split, then yes, it's a sandwich.
So a pita then is not a sandwich either.
No, because it's one piece of bread folded over. If we go with the standard definition, then a sandwich is something between two pieces of bread. But then,
maybe we need to define what a sandwich is. But Edward, I'm going to drop you out of here. Thanks for coming up, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, sounds like a plan.
Thank you. And Steve Childers.
Hey.
So what do you think, sir? Are you playing with toys back there?
I am. I'm playing with my model railroad, which when I play with it becomes a toy. And I don't know what the people will rationalize the meaning of words to whatever they think the word means. Okay. But we have the definitive source. It's called a dictionary. All right. And a dictionary, and I put it up there earlier, defines what a model is, what a toy is.
Hold on a second, Steve. So who says a dictionary is a definitive source? Why?
The law in every case in Western civilization.
Well, see, but I would argue that a legal dictionary has different definitions than a Webster dictionary in some cases, because a term legally may mean something different.
It can be expanded or tightened for a legal dictionary for a legal purpose. All right. But here nor there, Webster's defines what it is, or American Heritage, whatever dictionary you want to do, whatever you want to look at. A model is you construct, all right, and it's primarily to be viewed. Now, you can turn model trains on and be an animation, and you're not really playing with it, okay? But once you start running operations and things like that, you are playing with your model railroad, and therefore becomes a toy. But that's okay. All right. I don't know what the hassle. I don't know what everybody is so locked in about the bad meaning of a toy. toys have a wide range of ages. Just because you say a toy doesn't mean it's for a 10-year-old. Okay? So that's my thing. And by the way, a hot dog is not a sandwich until you put it in a bun, because a hot dog is a piece of meat.
Just want to say thanks to Manny for coming in and giving me a $5 super chat, saying hello to everybody.
I like your Lego trains, by the way, Brian.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're pretty incredible. Yeah, no, but I do think it's interesting a little bit what you're saying too about the idea that we have this book called the dictionary that defines words, and the dictionary does change. They add words, they remove words, slang words get added, definitions
But there's
do change.
There are criteria for getting words added to a dictionary.
Yeah, and then as Brian was talking about earlier, on the other hand, we've got this thing called Wikipedia, which is a source that a lot of people go to these days, and yet the requirements for adding something or removing something to it are a lot lower.
A lot.
But Andy Ambrose says, my boss calls his Ferrari and other cars his toys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, it's
So anyway, that I was planning on just sitting back tonight and listening for a change, but I thought I'd jump in and give you my 2 cents based upon what a dictionary is, and that defines what our words are. So
yeah, and I think it's one of the things that's very interesting to me about this is Brian's an engineer. You, for many years, were a safety director. So
I have an engineering background too.
Oh, there you go. And some people are talking about that the difference between a model railroad and a toy is just more of like a gut feeling. Like, it does just, seem like a toy, or does it seem like a model railroad? Whereas then there are other people that are very literal about, what the actual definition is. And like, does it fit the definition? Which takes us back to an organization like the NMRA that has set up standards and or criteria that define, what it is theoretically in more detail than, than just the Webster's dictionary. And, here's Steve 87th PSAP. A model is really meant for display. You could say, right, I mean, if you create an architectural model of something, or if you have a model of something, in general, it is just a display item. It's not
It's constructed for display purposes, but that doesn't mean you can't play with it too. How many of us had model ships, model planes, model cars growing up, all right, that we built for display, and we ended up playing with them. Okay, they became toys.
And then one to throw into that is a dollhouse in model.
It can be.
All
right, can be. Depends on how it's used.
There you go. So its use defines is one criteria you could say, which was, I believe,
that's
one of Brian's criteria was sort of operations and stuff. How its use can sort of define it.
Although I'll differ with Brian, I don't think he considered operations playing when it is, but that's okay. All right, it's a game.
Well, I mean, one of the things I specifically listed out, and again in the full presentation go into, it's okay for a model for operations to simply be a circle and run around. It's the 5 criteria that I put up is simply a checklist of how do we analyze something. Because one of the key things is, at least when we went to the NMRA and at the show there, a lot of people said a lot of people simply were going, oh, I know it's not a model. Well, okay, what are you using to draw that conclusion? And so just getting people to start thinking about why do they think something is a model versus not? And that's really what this is all about, is getting to think about the hobby and not necessarily drawing a line in the sand, but just think about how we define it.
Right. If you go back to what the dictionary definitions are, again, Legos would be defined as a model. Okay. In the way that you're building yours. However, people perceive and rationalize them as toys, and that all Legos are toys. And again, it goes back to the definition. Are you playing with them like a kid, or are you building them for display? And display can be running on a track. Okay. It's just an animated display. Okay. So it'd fall into the model category.
So I like
But
this
that
from
is
Andy.
something.
Andy says,
Andy's
Andy's saying when he builds something, it's modeling. Sorry, I know this video conference stuff's hard.
It is.
Andy's saying when he builds something, he's modeling. When he operates it, it's a game. So he's playing with it.
Yep. And that is, again, just turning them on and watching them isn't necessarily playing with them. That's it can be part of an animated display. But if you're running switching operations and things like that, yeah, you're playing with it. And it becomes a toy. But that's okay. I have fun with my big boy toys.
Yeah, I do think it's so here's the question. Why, and this is obviously outside of your presentation because you're not really asking that question, but why is it that people why is there a negative connotation to calling a model railroad a toy? Like what is the aspect of that bothers people?
People perceive it as being simplistic, all right, instead of detailed. And again, that's a misperception due to rationalizations, all right, or irrationalizations. So
are you trying to say that as humans we're rational beings? Because I think that gets into a whole nother.
Not everyone.
Well, yeah, exactly. Both my layouts will be animated displays of prototypical railroads, not toys being played with.
Okay.
Why get offended? But so Ian is asking a question that I think a lot of us should maybe be asking ourselves about a lot of different areas in life. But yeah, why get offended in general? It is a complete waste of energy in general. Yeah.
In organizations, and I'm not in the NMRA, I'm not an AP or MMR, any of that. So, but I am the head of the American Koi Judges Association, and we set the standards and judging criteria for koi in the U.S. based upon Japan, but still there's still differences. And there has to be that criteria, those rules, those fine lines. The lines got to be drawn at some point.
Yeah.
And regardless of where that line is, there's always somebody that's going to attempt to rationalize around that line. All right. And now, does that mean the line can't change? Absolutely not. It can change over time. And as a matter of fact, we're going through
thanks to
the process
Brian,
now.
there's no more Legos in the NMRA. So
or maybe thanks to Brian, there will be.
that's true, right? You could start a Lego special interest group as a part of the NMRA.
So,
Well, with the current rules, I could argue that all of my Lego is 3D printed. It's not branded Lego, therefore I can enter it.
Oh, interesting. So wait, hold on. The quote unquote Lego that you're buying isn't Lego brand Lego.
No, the Lego that I currently have is.
Okay.
But I could argue that I could go 3D print Lego bricks, assemble it just like Lego, snap together, and I could enter it, and it wouldn't be considered Lego because it is 3D printed. and
you
it
have
simply snaps together.
wouldn't you have a patent or infringement on that, or something along those lines?
True.
Yeah, but not. I mean,
But
with
you
the
could make
NMRA,
a different style of modular construction.
you talk about
Correct.
patent infringement, but what about the whole thing of if you build a model based off of a prototype, you're you're um, you're violating that patent then as well for creating something that's
No. A patent has to be identical. Okay. A scaled
so
down
if you
version.
change the scale of it, it's no longer considered the same.
If you substantially, I believe you got to change 7 criteria. All right. From the original patented version, you change 7 criteria, it could look identical almost and still be okay. And
So
that's
Andy's
what
saying
you
just
do.
because it's 3D printed is only an argument if you design it yourself. So you would need to design or make a substantial change to the Lego bricks to make it your own.
Modular bricks. Get away from the word Lego and so and I'd take copies of the modular bricks and a pack of Legos and say, okay, this is Lego. This is my modular bricks. They don't interconnect. Therefore,
Gus is saying he's seen a 611 in Lego.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I posted some links earlier. I can definitely post them again. Bryan does not have a YouTube channel, but he is involved in a couple Facebook groups, and you can see more Lego stuff. Bryan, is there any chance of you starting a YouTube channel and kind of showing off the whole build process of how you create one of these? Is there any way I can convince you of that, or is that just
There
not in the
might
cards?
there might be on this one. The videos that I've shown this evening are online. They are on Flickr. One of the main sources is on Flickr. There is a Lego Train mock group. MOCK stands for my own creation in the Lego community. And so there's a bunch of people who post on there. My stuff is on there, probably buried at this point because I haven't built anything new in a while, unfortunately. But there is a lot of examples on there of works in progress of people building stuff, both the engines and scenery, and how they go through it. And some of that is digital design. Other people, like hands-on, build it. Oh, that didn't work. Take it apart. Try something else. But in terms of YouTube channel, I haven't really thought about going for one yet. That's not a no. It's just haven't thought about it.
I didn't know this. Andrew Stepp is saying in the US, Lego does not have interlocked block exclusivity, but they do in the EU.
And that is an issue because you can find in some stores, I saw someone post in the chat, Mega Bloks,
Yep.
which Mega Bloks is kind of a recognized Lego knockoff, but there are also 3 or 4 companies out of China that make Lego type products, and they're interchangeable with Lego because they're the same size, but the quality control isn't the same. So same thing with Mega Bloks is that if you try to assemble it, usually it will fall apart and it doesn't have the same snap and cohesion that Lego does. The tolerances aren't quite as tight.
And patents expire too, don't they?
They do.
The patents expired on Lego?
I would imagine so. They've been around. I think patents are good for 7 years. They may vary.
Something like that. I know Disney's having an issue because technically Mickey Mouse is no longer under, trademark in terms of that. And the argument is
copyright and trademark, you can reapply.
Yeah.
True, but the argument is that the original Mickey Mouse is nothing like the current one. And that's getting into a whole separate issue. But
anyway.
right, so trying to stay on topic, yes, it eventually does come up. I don't remember the specifics off the top of my head of whether or not you can reapply in terms of that, or after 7 years, it goes open and you can't reapply it anymore.
So Thomas from Split Rock is asking, if you are not trying to earn a merit award for your Legos, why enter it in an NMRA contest?
The main one for me was for the fun of it. It's, hey, I'm there anyway. My models aren't doing anything for the first part of the week until we go to the show. So instead of sitting in the hotel room, I can have them sitting in the contest hall. And then also to kind of, as they did, generate a discussion about it. And so I never entered the models to win. I entered the models to be talked about. And they did, and they stirred up a hornet's nest.
And besides, there's so many different areas in the AP program, the MMR certification, that the scratch building of a locomotive is only one small section of, like, what is it, 17? I think you got to do 13 to 17. Andy knows. So that's why people
Like
may enter
7
an
out of
MR.
13.
That's why people will enter an MRA contest, even though they're not going for certification, because they only have an interest in one of those areas.
And Thomas from Split Rock saying, the NMRA is not about having a bigger audience, and they continually prove that over and over again by alienating people. But the NMRA is an organization devoted to standards in the hobby. And my argument to Thomas would be, by not taking the position about growing the hobby, I feel like they're kind of alienating people. And so the NMRA is not the group trying to grow the hobby or increase sales. That should be the manufacturers of trains. And I don't disagree, but my argument is that if they're making themselves exclusive and not inclusive, then that's actually going to do damage to the hobby. But then that takes us back to, is Lego a toy or is Lego a model railroad? And if you define Lego of anything as a toy, then a Lego model railroad is a toy, and then it's not a part of the NMRA. So maybe that then, I guess, people encouraged me to get into the NMRA. I did eventually join. That's how I was able to meet Brian and meet, a bunch of other people. And I think the only way to change it is you kind of have to, join it. Right? I mean, like, you can email Gordy all day, but until you're an NMRA member and you're going to regional events and doing stuff, it's hard to, the whole grassroots politics argument. You got to get in, to make a change. So
you get out of it what you put into it.
Exactly. So, I think it's a good organization to be a part of, and I think there are issues with it that I think are valid, and,
There's issues with every organization, though, in any hobby.
Absolutely. Completely agree. So it's about 7:45. Steve, do you have anything left to say? If not, I'm going to drop you out of here. And... Steve, I know you've always got plenty to say, Steve. I know. But it just any final
Parting shots?
words?
As I said, a hot dog in and of itself is not a sandwich. Not until you put a bun on it, at least.
Yeah, that is true. It's true.
We'll see you later.
See you later. Thanks, Steve. Tim from CP368 says the competitions have standards, though. And that's an interesting argument, too. It's like, why would you even want to enter? And I think it's just about inclusivity. It's the Walters NMRBO contest had an open category this time around that they didn't have last time. And it allows people to get involved that might not fit into a specific category. So I do think it's yeah. Anyway, so Bryan, interesting topic. I think it's, I'm glad that you took the topic and took sort of the situation that you got into with the NMRA, and you're turning it into something positive instead of just closing the doors on things. But uh, where do you see this going? Like, are you advocating for NMRA rule changes? Are you trying to create a Lego category? Like, what's the future of Lego and the NMRA and Lego and model railroading and
I would
all that kind
be
of stuff?
highly surprised if the NMRA ever officially acknowledges L scale as a actual scale. Um, but it's mostly what the presentation that I'm presenting next month is about, is just trying to stir up kind of the logjam of thought of this is a model, this isn't. Well, hang on, why do we define that as a model and this not? And most of in my discussions, especially at that convention, were because it is. Well, okay, if there's no underlying logic underneath it, how do we engage in a conversation about it? So if we can start identifying why we think something is a model versus not, and it's okay that people have different opinions, but then we can start discussing the differences behind it rather than just two people arguing, this is a model, this isn't. And so it's just, again, asking the question, what is model railroading?
Bryan, thank you so much for being here. On that note, I'm going to, roll my end thing in a second. But if people in the chat have things coming up, contests or any of that stuff that they want to mention, please put them in there now. Some people are commented about too, like Fred saying, unfortunately, when you live in the middle of nowhere, the NMRA is nothing more than a standard setter. I will say that the NMRA does have a partnership program that offers a lot of discounts. So just like how you can go to my sponsors and use the code HUMAN and get discounts, the NMRA does offer discounts on a lot of stuff, and you can pretty quickly. I know with the amount of model railroad stuff that I purchase, I can quickly make my money back using some of the discounts that they provide. But yeah, it's Spoolerock saying, why didn't the Lego groups have their own contests if the NMRA starts to allow non-scale modeling? Where does it end?
And
That's
the Lego groups actually do have their own contests. There are kind of 3 contests throughout the year. There's a national competition, an international competition, and then there's a kind of competition at some of the shows, and you get small little awards. I mean, the international one, you do get a prize. There's enough people entering that people donate. There's some donations behind it that, yeah, the top 3 or 4 get something. But there is, in fact, Lego contests.
and Thomas said this a little earlier. The thing that everyone misses is that the judging, and he's talking about the NMRA judging, it's not about competing with other models. It's about competing against a set of standards. So, like along those lines, I kind of feel like if people want to enter a Lego train, let them enter a Lego train and judge them based on, that standard. And maybe they'll only get, a 2 out of 10 or whatever it is because it's being based on the standard, but does it need to be outright eliminated because it's a different medium, than some other medium. But yeah, a lot of people now we got a bunch of people getting into a lot of this NMRA stuff, and I should probably have a conversation some point about the NMRA, not so much to bash it, but just because it is kind of hard to there's a limited amount of money, there's a limited amount of time, there's a limited amount of groups that you can be a part of. And I think, whether the NMRA should be one of those groups you should support, it's an interesting conversation. If you're into DCC and, if you think LCC is the future, it's like maybe being a part of the NMRA is, a good part of that. And, well, then you get into the whole discussion about how the NMRA has LCC, and then there are people that are working outside the NMRA on a LCC something. Anyway, this is definitely definitely a rabbit hole we can go down forever. CP368 Productions has a couple rail fanning videos coming. He's also going to go back over the future layouts again, since the intros are 100 videos back and 50 subscribers again. Funny you say that. I want to go. I want to update some of my old videos as well. Roy Eltham says, because humans are involved. Yep. If we could just get humans out of the picture. Yeah, and Thomas says, the NMRA seems to be everybody's favorite whipping club. It's too easy of a target. And I think that's true. I think that is something that I think a little bit, to some extent, the NMRA brought on themselves, but I also think that there are a lot of really good people that are doing their best to change things. So Andrew wants to see more future-based layouts and sci-fi stuff. But well, Bryan, again, thank you so much for being here, and it's been really great. And if people want to see more about Bryan, if people want to hear more of Bryan's talk, they can join for $49, 80 hours of content over 5 days, starting on July 6th, NMRA 2021. It's going to be done via Zoom, and what they're doing is Bryan's going to give his presentation, and then for the next hour, he'll be in a separate meeting room where people that have any follow-up questions can, ask and join. So it won't just be presentations. There'll also be this back and forth as well. So, Bryan, thank you again, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you for having me.
It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity.